Hi, this is Subramaniam Shankaran from IEEE. Consent in data protection is a veritable base for something to actually happen. Now, what basically is a consent? Consent is actually an agreement. Now, there are different types of consent that happens in the data protection. Okay, one of the companies in UK has been penalized because the consent has not been complete. It was ambiguous. It was penalized by the ICO. Now, consent is an agreement for something to actually happen. Okay. So, give permission for something to happen is actually a consent. Whenever there is a consent given by the data subject to the data controller, the data subject needs to be aware of a lot of things. Okay. So, they should be in a position to understand for which they are giving the permission to happen. Now, what are they actually? The data controller, okay, the company which is collecting the data must specify clearly the purpose of the data processing. Okay, for example, in my certified chief data protection officer training from the BCIA, I usually, take the example from Schneer.com. In Schneer.com, if you're going to subscribe to the newsletter, okay, in the page where you're going to put in an email, okay, for subscription, it clearly says what is the purpose of you giving the email and what he is actually going to do. And he will also specify or mention the withdrawal process. Moment you say, I don't want to receive the newsletter, you can either send him an email or on the newsletter email, you can click on unsubscribe. Okay, then you are unsubscribed. That's the withdrawal process. And he clearly says, okay, the mailing is done by MailChimp. And you want to have a look at the privacy policy, you can go to Intuit privacy policy and terms, okay, and then you can have a look into it. Okay. So the purpose of the data processing clearly says, okay, it's going to be only sending the newsletter. Now, the beautiful thing about Schneer.com is it does not collect any other information because for the newsletter, all you need is only the email address. Okay, you don't need the first name, last name, mobile number, blah blah blah. No. Okay, so the purpose of the data processing is clearly mentioned. What is involved in participating with this consent? Okay, should be clearly mentioned. The other one is benefits and the risk of your data processing. So the benefit is receiving the newsletter, but again, when you ask me for the risk, it's actually covered when you do an data protection impact analysis. It's very similar to the RA or bioservice. So the PIMS have what is actually called as a DPIA. So the benefit of doing the data processing is something which he clearly says you'll be receiving the newsletter, which is published 15th of every month. I'm a big fan of Bruce Schneer. Okay, in fact, if you read his Data and Goliath, okay, you really understand what this privacy means, okay, and where all we are actually losing. We are focusing when somebody is collecting the data, but there is a voluntary disclosure that every data subject is actually doing when they join a social media, the mobile number, email, etc. So when somebody asks you for the data, then we become cautious, okay, we don't give it. But in the social media, when we do a voluntary disclosure, okay, we don't think about anything else. We want to meet people, you want to socialize. When the objective is socializing, okay, then the caution takes a backseat. Okay, anyway, let's not get onto that now, and we'll have a lot of videos coming up, and you can subscribe to the channel to stay connected about the attacks and the intricacies of information security and the data privacy. Details of the processing, data processing contact. Okay, you should share the DPO details. So if you are well versed in the Google Docs, you can say the site colon and the company name or the website, and then if you say DPO, then it will search for the DPO contact on that particular domain, okay, and gives you who the data protection officer is. Okay, procedure for withdrawing the consent. The Schneer.com clearly says you unsubscribe, click on the unsubscribe button on the newsletter email, okay, or you can send an email to Schneer or Schneer.com, okay, he is going to unsubscribe you from the mailing list. Planned usage of the data during the operation, dissemination, storage, publishing, and archiving of the data. Now, moment your data is actually collected, okay, the data controller who's collecting your data should clearly say how they're going to use it, where they're going to store it, okay, how long you're going to retain the data for. Now, most of the privacy policies that you actually see online, okay, it mentions all this information. It should mention all the information. If it doesn't, you have to change it to mention it. If not, if there's a breach, See, as long as there is no breach, okay, we actually don't face any problem. Okay, I'm not saying that you should not be prepared for it. We should be prepared for it. Okay, and we should have, see, there are two things. Okay, one is actually called as the due care and the due diligence. Okay, when we have a due care to put in the policies and everything in place, we should also continuously do the due diligence to find whether has something has changed in the organization. Do we need to modify the privacy policy, security policy, blah blah blah, etc. When we actually do it, okay, so we are ensuring that we are serious about the data privacy and data security. If not, then we know there's a lapse. Okay, if we don't know, the supervisory authority will know that there is actually a lapse. Okay, so when you mention all this on the privacy policy and make it online, that makes it transparent. The transparency come into the picture. Okay, how you're going to process it, how you're going to disseminate the data, where you're going to store it, how long you're going to retain the data for. Okay, so all these things must be mentioned in the privacy policy, and the privacy policy must be published online. Okay, that's what the transparency is. So strategies for assuring the ethical use of the data. Okay, you can assure the data subject that the data will not be disclosed without the consent. It will not be passed on to the processor, sub-processor, sub-processor, etc. Unless otherwise the data subject is going to say, yes, you can actually process it. Okay, and procedure for safeguarding the personal information, maintaining the confidentiality, anonymizing the data, particularly in relations to data archiving, sharing, and the reuse. Okay, how the data is actually safeguarded. Okay, the online data, the offline data could be a backup, it could be an archive. How you're going to actually secure it? Moment the data is online, your technical controls will take care of the data. Okay, moment it is offline, okay, it also involves the physical control. I always say when you take a backup of the data, the administrative control is to put a label on the data tape to say that, okay, this is a proprietary property of so-and-so organization. You label it confidential, sensitive, critical, blah, blah, blah. And you encrypt the data. That brings in the technical control, and the physical control is to safeguard the tape in the transit. Okay, there's a special box, there's a sponge, there's a special name for it. The sponge inside so that it can safeguard the tape from the physical damage. And you are going to put it on the microfiber-proof cabinet at the destination or the offsite location, etc. Okay, the physical security is also there. So administrative security or administrative control, technical control, the physical controls all work in a harmony to ensure that your data is secured. Now, a lot of organizations, what I have actually seen it, they have got two firewalls, okay, to form a DMZ, they've got a WAF, they've got IDPS, they've got a SIM. The technical controls are tremendous. But the moment the data is actually backed up, okay, it is sent to the offsite location, the only control the data will have is the physical security and the encryption of the data. Okay, now, when I actually speak about offline backup, okay, I have my students questioning about the online backup. It is good, it is quick, okay, the restorations becomes quick. But thing is, if there's a ransomware attack and if this device is also connected to the network, okay, it is not isolated, okay, so the online backup will also it might undergo a ransomware attack. If it's encrypted, then you cannot even restore from the, the backup, okay, because it's an online backup. Always, the offline backup is also good, okay, there's the pros and cons for both. Taking a backup on a cloud, taking a backup online, okay, on-prem, and taking a backup as an offsite offline. All these things have pros and cons, which requires a separate discussion. And we are planning to discuss this with a couple of my students and the professionals. We will also post that video soon. Now, how it should be presented? It should not be bundled. Okay, it cannot be a huge single paragraph, 60 sentences. No. Divide them, make it easily readable, okay, so that the data subject does not miss out, okay, when you are specifying something. Unticked opt-in, okay, so this actually covers the principle of what is called the privacy by default. So the privacy by default, opt-in should not be checked, okay, by default. It should be unchecked, okay. The data subject should deliberately opt in, okay, and the consent should be freely given. He should not be forced to give the consent. You cannot say that only if you click on the radio box, then you can go to the next screen. It should not be that way. If it is that way, then it's also a problem. Okay, clear records must be retained, because when the data subject is going to give a consent, you record the timestamp from which system he has actually done a date and timestamp, so that it acts as an artifact. Clarify right to withdraw consent. Okay, the Schneer.com. If you go there, if you want to, when you click on the subscribe for the newsletter, he says you click on unsubscribe or send me an email. So the right to withdraw the consent should be clearly specified to the data subject. Okay, and time limit for reviewing the consent must be present. Okay, you can say you can review a consent within a week's time or within 2 weeks, within 30 days. Okay, if they change their mind, they can withdraw. But again, withdrawal of the consent is also an option that is given to the data subject. Now, if the consent is given for the multiple options, okay, within the web form, you can give them an option to review. Okay, if I have subscribed to 5 or 6 newsletters in a portal, I can reconsider my decision and then I can withdraw. Okay, from 1 or 2 newsletters to be received on my email. Okay, the option for reviewing the consent should also be presented to the data subject. This on the informed consent. Now, there are various different types of consent. We are going to have videos regularly on the security and the privacy. Stay connected, stay subscribed, stay safe and secure. Thank you very much.